Now, starting with the top story, former U.S. President Barack Obama will take the stage on day 2 of the Democratic National Convention to boost his longtime ally, Kamala Harris, in her presidential bid against Donald Trump. Obama will be preceded by his wife, Michelle, who tops Democrats' wish list as future president. The list of speakers on day 2 of the convention includes Senator Bernie Sanders, Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, and Harris's husband, Doug Emhoff. Obama's DNC address will come full circle for the former U.S. president. He returns to the convention dais 20 years after his first appearance in 2004. Then Illinois Senator Barack Obama delivered a keynote address at the convention in Boston. 4 years later, he went on to become America's first black president. Obama's backing for Harris comes at a critical juncture as Democrat supporters look to make history again, with the country getting its first woman and first black and South Asian president. Former Trump White House press secretary Stephanie Grisham made an appearance at the convention. She told the crowd she used to be a true believer who spent holidays with the Trump family, but now she's backing Harris. Grandsons of former President Jimmy Carter and John F. Kennedy cast Vice President Harris in the same image as their famous family members.
Navigated the Cuban Missile Crisis peacefully. For my grandfather, it was never about fame, recognition, accolades, or awards. His legacy is measured by the lives he has touched and the good he has done. Kamala Harris carries my grandfather's legacy. She knows what is right, and she fights for it.
The torch has been passed to a new generation, to a leader who shares my grandfather's energy, vision, and optimism for our future. That leader is Vice President Kamala Harris.
Harris's election effort has raised around $500 million, a Reuters report said, quoting sources. The U.S. vice president entered the fray after President Joe Biden stepped aside from the top of the Democratic ticket, unleashing floods of funding that had dried up in the weeks after Biden's disastrous debate against Trump. Meanwhile, former President Donald Trump on Kamala Harris's record on crime and safety. Now, Trump, however, faced criticism from her campaign over holding an event in a Michigan town where white supremacists had rallied a month ago. His running mate, J.D. Vance, made a stop in Kenosha, Wisconsin, to laud Donald Trump's law enforcement policies. Vance also said Democratic leadership was responsible for violent crime in cities like Chicago, currently hosting the Democratic National Convention.
And my little theory about why they decided to have the convention in Chicago is, Tim Walz has been going around saying that he served in war, and maybe they did it in Chicago so that he could actually accurately say that he visited a combat zone.
Meanwhile, independent presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is considering ending his campaign to join forces with Republican rival Donald Trump. Kennedy's running mate has said, Nicole Shanahan said that as independents, she and Kennedy ran the risk of drawing support from would-be Trump voters and clearing the way for Democrats Kamala Harris and Tim Walz to win the November election. Now, for more on this, we're being joined by our correspondent, Susan Teherani. Thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you. Now, each day of the convention features a theme related to the tagline, for the people, for our future. Now, the theme for the second day is Bold Vision for America's Future. I'd like you to elaborate on that.
Yeah, as you mentioned, the keynote speakers will really be Barack Obama and former First Lady Michelle Obama. They're expected to take the stage a little earlier than last night, which we saw, President Biden take the stage almost before midnight Eastern time, where a lot of viewers ultimately in a lot of swing states were sleeping. So it seems that they're going to be appearing a lot sooner. On the other hand, we already heard from Kamala Harris. She's campaigning in Wisconsin. She was via video link talking to the DNC convention. And of course, Wisconsin is a swing state. We also know that former President Donald Trump is campaigning in Michigan, a swing state as well. But what's very noteworthy and is making buzz on social media is the DNC and the Harris campaign is expected to have a very big name perform during this convention, either tonight or the next few nights. And I think that's the question that many are asking, because celebrity plays a very important role in the Democratic Party's support. So all eyes are going to be on that. But nonetheless, Michelle Obama is known to give very inspiring speeches, and I think a lot of people are looking forward to that.
All right. Now, before we go any further, Susan, do stay with us. We know that Bernie Sanders is also speaking. He's live. Let's listen to him.
Bring home the hostages and demand an immediate ceasefire. At home right here, we must take on big pharma, big oil, big ag, big tech, and all the other corporate monopolists whose greed is denying progress for working people. On November 5th, let us elect Kamala Harris as our president, and let us go forward to create the nation we know we can become. Thank you all very much.
All right, that was Bernie Sanders. Now, he talked about the ceasefire, which is, of course, a big issue. And he also talked about, now, these Bernie Sanders and Chuck Schumer, these are candidates who had been supporting Biden. How do you look at their speech, and how did Bernie Sanders take a look forward? Now, okay, maybe we just missed on that. Susan, and now we just heard Bernie Sanders. He's talking about ceasefire. He's also talking about Kamala Harris to elect her in the next election. Now, these were candidates who were supporting Biden as well. How do you take a look at this?
Yeah, Bernie Sanders was one of the last people who really came on board supporting Harris, and that's when ultimately it was decided that Harris would be the nominee. It's very important that Harris brought up Gaza, because foreign policy, while it's not usually important in an election cycle here in the United States, people vote based on domestic issues. Right now, the issue that's happening in Gaza with the hostages, some of them American, it plays a very important role. The Biden administration, which Harris being the vice president, really wants to get a ceasefire deal done before the end of the year and as soon as possible. That's going to be considered a foreign policy victory. But it's also important to note that last night it was Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a leftist progressive congresswoman, and now you have Bernie Sanders, who's known to be very progressive and leftist. These are individuals that are taking prime time slots at the DNC. And this really shows the changing nature of the Democrat Party. Before, the Democrats would try to sort of distance themselves from these individuals, trying to appear more center. But now we see that they're embracing them, and it appears that the Democrat Party really is made up of individuals like these.
All right, Susan, thank you for bringing us the latest. Do stay with us. We'll come back right